Hey guys, and welcome to a new series that I'm calling Let's Max Warframe. In this series I'm going to be showing the builds that I run on the weapons and have decided to max out with the use of forma. Now a word of warning, this is not going to be like my Let's Mod series where they are unformed weapons using easy to gain mods. These builds are going to include event mods and syndicate mods where appropriate. Now on the topic of syndicate mods, I just want to talk about this video and the use of the Gilded Truth Mod for the Burston Prime in relation to the current Viver scandal that is plaguing Warframe right now. I'm sure the question you're asking is whether I used the Viver map to gain access to the syndicate mods for the Arbiters of Hexes, and the answer to that is yes, I did, and I'll explain why. The issue with Viver is down to the tileset being too small to support the number of spawns on it, meaning that it spawns constantly, and this is the right size for Warframes like Mag and Excalibur to use their abilities to kill super quickly and super effectively. Now my opinion on this is that it is nothing new. The only reason this has come to light recently is that because of the giant grind wall that is Syndicates in its current form was being circumvented by this tileset. Now, I'm not going to call it an exploit because it was using legitimate game mechanics, not breaking the game to try and gain an advantage. Teams were hugely min-maxed for this effect, and it was not your average group setups or Warframe builds that was used to run this node. It was very specific setups for a very specific goal, with every single mod was maxed, which is an awful lot of credits, an awful lot of fusion cores, and mostly it's going to be your veterans that were doing it, and they were farming standing in the most efficient way that they could find. Now, does that sound familiar? It should, because it's been done for a very long time. I don't see any difference to the guys sitting in Viver with their setups using their abilities to people using Vauban and Nova on places like Pluto Secura or Ares Acad, farming endless XP and power leveling weapons. There is honestly no real difference in my eyes. The problem was never Viver. It was to some extent, but not entirely. And it wasn't even entirely the frames, it was the way that the system rewards frame XP as syndicate rep. Is it any wonder that people are going to go to Viver and places like Viver and farm 7,000 syndicate XP in 40 minutes when doing a single exterminate is going to net you 30 syndicate rep in a single run? Now, I've got a great respect for DE and the way they make the game, and for the courage to stand up and say, whoops, my bad, like they did on the forums last night. And I would never do anything to damage the game or exploit it in any way. At the end of the day, people were using the tools available to them to get the most efficient use out of their time. Perhaps it's a slightly more extreme example than the guys on Secura, but not a million miles apart. Now, I know changes are coming to the system, and I will do a proper video on the subject when it arises, but I felt I should clear the air right now at the start of this series, especially at a time where there is a lot of strong opinions on the matter floating around. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's take a look at the weapon in question, the Burston Prime. As you can imagine, this is a Prime version, a direct upgrade of the standard Burston. Now in this series, normally I'm not going to talk about the weapon too much, if I previously reviewed it. However, I've not done it with this one, so just a quick couple of features that I love. The Burston Prime is, as you can guess, a burst fire weapon, firing bursts of 3, doing a pretty decent 39 damage a hit, which is not the best out of the rifles, but still pretty reasonable, especially when you take into consideration the fact that it fires 3 rounds at once, with very little recoil and very little spread when you take heavy caliber into account. It's got pretty much no crit chance to talk about with just 5%, however it comes with a reasonable 15% status chance, which can really help with the application of status procs and also the damage from the weapon. So now let's talk about the Gilded Truth Mod. It's purchasable from the Arbiters of Hexes Syndicate store for 25k standing with the faction, or it can be traded in the trade channel, although for an insane amount of platinum at this current time. Now the mods like Gilded Truth are something new within Warframe, a mod with a charge based attack attached to it. With the mod for the Burston Prime, when you reach the required charge, the weapon lets out a wave of 1,000 toxin damage around the player, whilst healing the player for 25% of their max HP. This mod is absolutely insane and an absolute blast to use against the infested, which, as you can see in the background, although as you can imagine the toxin damage really doesn't help against the toxic ancients, is going to deal with the light infested pretty effectively. It's also super effective against the corpus, more specifically the fleshy techs and the crewmen. Now, the fire rate increase on the mod of 380% really changes the use of the Burston, and if used properly, can be made to fire more like an automatic weapon than a burst fire weapon, at the expense of a rather high ammunition cost. And it seriously changed the weapon from being an honestly pretty mediocre one, into being one of the most fun weapons I've had in my armory right now. And since getting Gilded Truth, I've actually not put the weapon down at all. Let's take a quick look at the Burston Prime and the formas I've added on and how to mod. So the weapon comes with a V as standard, however I've added 4 forma, as you can see up here, to add another 3 Vs and a dash. So we've got 4 Vs and a dash in total. So let's have a look at the Grineer build that I go with, and I can immediately see, I know everyone else is going to be screaming at me, but Rhyme Rounds is in the wrong slot, and it will become apparent, I promise you, as to why. Now we've got Serration, Split Chamber, Heavy Caliber and Gilded Truth here, which is our base mods for all 3 of our builds. We've got High Voltage and Thermite Rounds bringing up Radiation, and Malignant Force and Rhyme Rounds for that viral damage. Now the reason I go for this build is it covers all the bases with the Grineer. The High Voltage Thermite Round combination with the Radiation really helps deal with those heavy Grineer, the Bombards and the Napalms especially. Malignant Force and Rhyme Rounds bringing up Viral. Viral damage is very good against the cloned flesh of the Grineer, which also has an amazing side effect of the Viral proc. Now the Viral proc will reduce an enemy's health by half, and this is the reason I got Rhyme Rounds in this wrong slot here. Is to bring that status up so I can proc that more often, because it really does help with some of those very high health Grineer enemies. So when we have a quick look at the Corpus build, we've got Serration, Split Chamber, Heavy Caliber, Gilded Truth. We've got High Voltage, Rhyme Rounds and Stormbringer bringing up magnetic damage, and then Infected Clip in the dash slot here. Now this is going to help with your shielded units with the magnetic proc, and the Infected Clip is there to do more damage against those fleshier units, things like your techs and your crewmen. Now I've gone for this rather than the status mod, just because I really want to get that extra toxic damage against those rather than the actual toxic proc. Now if we're going to take a look at the build for the Void, it's very easy to change out from this build. You swap out the Infected Clip for Hellfire, since that seems to be the best against the enemies in the Void, and then you swap out Rhyme Rounds for Malignant Force, and that will bring up Corrosive and Heat, which seems to be the best combination right now to deal with those Void units. This also will work very nicely against the units of the Infested as well as those Void units. So in essence, once an ugly duckling, struggling to get noticed in amongst of all of the other rifles, now a fully fledged swan worthy of keeping up with the pack. The Burston Prime has overnight gone from being a weapon that just sat in my arsenal that I just formed, to being a staple weapon in my armory. Now I understand that this is only one build, and this is the build that I find most effective for me. You can change out those dash polarities with the dual stat mods if it's easier for you, and if you prefer more of those status procs. However, I find that the combination of status and raw damage to be the best combo for me. I hope that you enjoyed my first episode of Max Warframe. Please leave any feedback in the comments below. I will respond as soon as I can. I also take suggestions, so feel free to leave a suggestion below, and I shall do a video on it if I have the build ready and done. As always guys, many thanks for watching. Please don't forget to leave a like and to subscribe, it helps me out a ton, and I shall see you in the next episode.